All right. Hello, stars. This is Luminousz Star. Welcome to the live stream. I want to thank everybody, especially my stars. Mwah! Thank you guys and gals so much for joining me for this stream. Thank you for your subscription. And of course, thank you for sharing your stories because you never know who's going to resonate with your stories. We're thriving forward together. We're growing together on this channel. So again, my stars, thank you so much. Special shout out to all of you. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be going over a topic that I recently uploaded. Okay, there was a video I just recently uploaded. So I'm going to be talking about that tonight. I think it was either last night that I uploaded this video, childhood trauma as an adverse effect of narcissistic abuse. Yeah, I believe it was last night. But anyway, I saw some of you had commented on that video, so I figured I would do that tonight for the live stream. And tonight's live stream is not going to be as long as usual because, you know, sometimes we go on for about 2 hours, maybe 3. But tonight, I'm going to go ahead and have to cut it to about an hour, okay? Maybe 30 minutes, but more than likely it'll be about an hour. So, of course, I'm going to be reading over my notes. Well, I tell you, it was so hot out today. I don't know if some of you are on the East Coast like I am, but it was really hot out today. And I think it's going to be hot all weekend. And it's not even August yet. But I'm just glad that old man winter is no longer with us. Okay, so I'm going to be, again, reading over some of my notes. And of course, I'm going to be going over some tools and points. And you can find the slide presentation link in the chat room. So just scroll up to the beginning of the chat and you will find a couple of streams there. Pardon me, not streams, the links. You're going to find that to the presentation. I'm going to be reading from 2 presentations. The first one is the childhood trauma as an adverse effect of narcissistic abuse. And the second stream, let's see, actually, speaking of second stream, Sunday, more than likely, I'm going to be doing another live stream. And I'm probably going to either continue this particular subject or speak on a subject that's related to this one. But I placed in the chat room, I put 2 different links. The first one I mentioned, the second one is seriously considering the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. You'll find those 2 links in the chat room. If you have questions, please place all of the questions in caps. That way I know that you have a question. If this is your first time joining Luminousz Star, welcome to Luminousz Star. And we certainly would love it if you become a part of the Star family. Okay, we would love to have you. All right, so let me go ahead and get on with the stream here. And again, I'm going to be reading my notes. All right. Certainly hope everybody is doing okay tonight or today, wherever you may be. And I also want to thank everyone for watching the video that I uploaded last night on this particular subject. I think this is a very serious subject because when we think about childhood trauma, you know, it's not too far-fetched to see as narcissistic abuse as being a high adverse or a high adversity. Okay, so when children are facing or dealing with narcissistic abuse, yeah, I mean, to me, it's just not far-fetched to see that narcissistic abuse is a high adversity, which can lead to health issues later in life. So we're really going to get into that. And of course, I'll have some tools for you, which is also in the description box below. Now, for everyone who's not able to watch the entire live streams, no worries. I'm going to have those uploaded. The one for tonight and the one for Sunday is going to be uploaded. So if you're not able to stay with me, I certainly hope you will be. But if you're not able to stay with me, no worries. Those live streams will be uploaded for a later viewing. Okay, first topic, stress activation due to exposure to high adversity during childhood. Second topic, narcissistic abuse as a high adversity, possibly resulting in childhood trauma. Third topic, health issues due to a history of early exposure to high adversity. Last and final topic will be the tools, references, and resources. Again, you can find it in the description box below. Also in the description box below, you will find details to the video or to the live stream. Okay, and please don't forget to like and or share this particular live stream. First point, the brain structure, hormonal system, immune system, DNA reading, and body development of children are adversely affected by early exposure to high adversity and toxic amounts of stress. The human body remembers trauma, while people may do a lot of things to forget events that have caused trauma due to exposure to adversity. Okay, now this is something that a lot of us do, regardless, whether or not we have faced narcissistic abuse as children or not. Okay, there's a lot of things that we face in life that may be a little bit challenging because it's very painful. So we may do certain things to try to forget that, right? But I'm here to tell you, the body never forgets. So we may do a lot of things to forget, but our bodies remember. Now, this is one clue that we know the body remembers. Every time we're triggered, right? The narcissist or the clumsy personality, they may say something or do something, and you're triggered. All right. So your body may tense up. You may all of a sudden feel a headache coming on. This is how come we know the body never forgets, even though we do a lot of things to try and forget. Another thing I want to state here is the brain structure, the hormonal system, immune system, and DNA reading of the body, right, of a child who's suffering from narcissistic abuse is altered, okay, is changed. Now, this can lead up to health issues later in life. But when a child is being raised by narcissistic parents, or a parent who has either a narcissistic personality or a cluster B personality, right? The child is being raised, or either the grandparents can be either a cluster B personality or grandparents who have a narcissistic personality. The bottom line is the child is being adversely affected. The child is facing high adversity. That's a toxic amount of stress. The child, as he or she develops, their brain structure can be altered simply due to all of the stress. Their immune system, okay, can be altered. Their hormonal system, okay, the DNA reading can be altered. Now, this is, something that a lot of us probably don't want to think about. But I thought this would be a great topic for the live stream because this is just getting deeper into why it is not your fault. If you have been a child facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, this is really what this live stream is about. Because I know it's pretty cliche. We hear it's not your fault, right? Whenever we may share with someone that we trust what we have gone through as children, okay? And, the response may be, or one of the responses may be, it wasn't your fault, right? This live stream, my main objective is to just really go deeply into why it's really not your fault. Okay, it's pretty common sense why it's not your fault. However, it's still great to hear that it's not your fault. But in this live stream, again, I just want to go deeper into why it is really not your fault. Okay, so this is just another spin on why it is not your fault. Some of the things that you have faced as a child due to narcissistic abuse. Okay, now we're talking about grandparents, parents who either have a cluster personality or a narcissistic personality disorder. When a child is facing certain challenges, okay, such as dealing with the shenanigans, dealing with the tactics for a narcissistic pride. Now, the mom or the dad, okay, who may have a cluster personality, who may have a narcissistic personality, one of their main objectives is going to be to make sure that the false self-image is thriving and surviving. So that means the parent or the parents are going to be looking for narcissistic supply. So that means the child is going to be subjected to certain shenanigans, okay, such as being deceived, even as far as like maybe physical abuse, verbal abuse, maybe even sexual abuse. Okay, now all of this is for the narcissistic supply of the parent who is either a narcissistic personality or a cluster B personality. Okay, so the child is just really, they're going through a lot. They're being adversely affected. So when they're facing the high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, as I stated, the brain structure is altered. Their immune system is altered. The DNA reading is even altered. So what does that mean? That means that the child is not developing properly. The child is not developing so he or she can be at their best as they grow from childhood to adolescent to adult. Okay, so let's move forward. All right. There are several health issues that are more likely to occur in people who have a history of experiencing early and repeated stress activation due to exposure to high adversity, which may have resulted in childhood trauma. The flight or fight activation becomes maladaptive rather than remaining adaptive, which could lead to poor coping strategies to deal with the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. Okay, so what's going on here? When the child is in a state of flight or fight mode, this absolutely means that he or she is facing a toxic and a high amount of stress. When the fight and flight when that type of activation is maladaptive, that means it is no longer functioning properly. Okay, so it's not working for the child that may be dealing with narcissistic abuse. Their coping strategies, is not working for him or her because they're in a constant state of flight or fight mode. That activation has gone off, right? And it's maladaptive. So the child may end up doing things that may place him or her in more trouble than protecting his or herself. So a lot of us, when we're in danger, okay, the first thing we want to do is protect ourselves. We want to get out of danger. What's interesting about the fight and flight activation that is maladaptive is that the child may end up who's under a lot of stress. What they may end up doing is getting themselves into more trouble, like say with the narcissistic parent. The narcissistic parent may be just going in on that child at the moment, verbal abuse, verbal misuse. The child may end up doing and or saying something that would influence the parent to go off even more. In the child's mind, they're trying to protect themselves. But again, the fight or flight activation is maladaptive. It's not properly functioning. It's ineffective. Okay. And I'm pretty certain some of you watching, you probably can think back to at least one time when maybe you were in trouble and you were trying to protect yourself, right? But it didn't turn out so well. The flight or fight activation is when it's working properly, it helps a person to get out of danger. Okay, so even if he or she is stressed, they're not going to place themselves in further danger. They're going to be able to what you call self-regulatory processing. They're going to be able to regulate themselves. They're going to be able to calm themselves down. They're going to be able to embrace themselves. Self-regulatory processing happens when a person is triggered or when they're in some sort of danger and they have to calm themselves down. They have to protect themselves. We'll get into self-regulatory processing later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, so I don't want to confuse you guys. But see, the thing is, when the fight and flight activation is maladaptive, it's just not working properly. So it's like that child cannot properly get his or herself out of danger. It's like they're in quicksand and they're sinking fast, no matter how much they're struggling. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. But when the fight and flight activation is maladaptive, that means it's ineffective. So when a person is in danger, okay, if they're clearly in danger, of course they're going to either fight or take flight. When a child is facing when they're in that high adversity, okay, such as narcissistic abuse, he or she is highly stressed, but the fight and flight activation is not working properly. So he or she is not going to, that child is not going to be able to really get themselves out of danger. Okay, and this is also where complex PTSD comes in, and we'll get into that as well, because the child is definitely facing a lot of stress, and he or she is probably going to want to protect themselves as much as possible, but it just doesn't work out that way a lot, especially when they're in a toxic environment, or when they're in a toxic environment, such as a dysfunctional family that may be headed or ran by a narcissistic parent or a parent who has a cluster B personality. Okay, let's move forward. All right, so let's go over some of the signs of narcissistic abuse and trauma. Okay, so these signs of narcissistic abuse and trauma, we're gonna compare these a little bit, because these particular signs can be seen as a person being in a high adversity situation. Okay, so by comparing the signs of effects of narcissistic abuse and trauma, one might be able to see how signs could be traits of high adversity. Let's go over the signs of trauma first. Denial, shock, avoidant personality. They may be guarded. That person may be very irritable and not really understand why, or they may be easily annoyed, or they may become angry very easily, or have a short fuse, right? Okay, and they may have brain fog. This is a person who may not be able to concentrate or focus very well, especially when a narcissist and the cluster B personality is around. Now imagine a child who is being narcissistically abused. This is also why sometimes when the narcissistic parent, when the narcissistic parent is around, the child seems to have, two left feet and just be all thumbs. The child, when they're not in the presence of the cluster B personality or the narcissistic parent, they seem to do a lot better. Some of you probably have experienced that, or you have known someone to experience that. It's like when they're not around the narcissist, they seem to be better. They seem to focus more. They seem to be able to perform and function a lot better in life. But when the narcissist comes around, when the cluster B personality comes around, it's like they're the total opposite. So it's interesting how that happens sometimes. But anyway, that person may experience brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and there may be some confusion as well. I want to invite a lot of my stars to please research brain fog. Now, this is one that I've done some research on, and it's very interesting to me, because it's like when the narcissist and cluster B personality is around, it's almost like they bring out the worst in that person. It's almost like that person has a very difficult time being themselves when the cluster B personality or the narcissistic parent or grandparent, and this can just be a narcissist or cluster B personality in that person's life, right? They just don't function the same. They seem to just not be themselves. Another sign of trauma is shame. They may become fearful or suffer from anxiety. They could be numb. Okay, there may be sadness. Now let's go over to the side of narcissistic abuse. Obsessed over how to please the narcissist. Lacking the ability to trust those who are trustworthy. Lacking self-esteem. Overly focused on their own mistakes. Idealize the narcissist. Disconnect or disassociation from, they have a backache all of a sudden. They may have digestive problems. They may feel, or they may not really realize that they have a really bad headache for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's connected to the high adversity they're experiencing when the narcissist and cluster B personality is having a dysfunctional relationship with him or her. Okay, so again, I say that childhood trauma is a part of that, or the result of the high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, that some child or some children, may be facing now, or they have. I just think that there's a correlation. I think there's a connection. And, of course, some people may debate it. Let's see, nightmares, flashbacks. They may tend to be hypervigilant or have hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping or insomnia, negative thoughts about self and the world. They may question their own sanity. So again, this is the result of narcissistic abuse. I want to go right to that last sign, questioning their own sanity. Some children who have been raised by narcissistic parents or parents who have a cluster personality, right? That child is so accustomed to being treated a particular way. He or she may also experience gaslighting techniques. Now, the narcissistic parent or the parent who has a cluster personality, from time to time, in order to get the narcissistic supply, what they may do is engage in the gaslighting technique, or they may use the gaslight technique for narcissistic supply. So the child may begin to question their own sanity, not just their own identity, but their own sanity. It just seems like reality and a dream are blurred or become blurred. Okay, this is very common. And unfortunately, it happens very often with children who face high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. All right, so I just went on and went over for you all the differences or the signs between the narcissistic abuse and trauma. Okay, so all of this to me could be traits of a person who is experiencing high adversity, okay, such as narcissistic abuse. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so those who have faced high adversity in childhood usually show signs of childhood trauma, therefore eventually suffer particular health issues later in life. Now, what's some of the health issues that a person can face later in life? They can have post-traumatic stress. Okay, I like to say post-traumatic stress injury rather than post-traumatic stress disorder, but we all know that as PTSD. They can also suffer complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, anxiety, depression, addiction. They can become suicidal. They can even end up with heart disease, lung cancer, and hepatitis. So these are just some of the health issues that a person can end up having later in life if they were a child exposed to high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. Because when you think about it, the child, as they grow up into adolescence, this is already, the high adversity is already taking its toll. It's taking effect. By the time a child is maybe 13 or 14, he or she, they may already show signs of, say, PTSD or complex PTSD and some of the other health issues that I just mentioned. This is very serious. At least I think so, right? So by the time a person is an adult, so now we've gone from child, okay, the childhood to adolescence to adult. So by the time they become an adult, some of the health issues that I just mentioned here, they may have double those. They may have triple those health issues. This is exactly why some children, some adult children of narcissists, they suffer a lot of these health issues. They suffer brain fog, anxiety, okay, all kinds of things. And this is all interwoven into the layers of trauma. This is when we get into the complex PTSD. Okay, so unfortunately, the DSM-5 doesn't have a diagnosis criterion for complex PTSD, but it does feature a diagnosis criterion for the PTSD. So when a person goes to his or her mental health practitioner, right, or when they go to their doctor, when they go to their counselor, when they go to their therapist for post-traumatic stress injury, unfortunately, they're not going to be treated for the complex or the symptoms of complex PTSD. And that is because there is no diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5 for symptoms of complex PTSD. Okay, so that particular doctor and practitioner, mental health care practitioner, they are under oath. They have to abide by the DSM-5, the diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. So it's not that they're intentionally not treating for complex PTSD. It's just that by oath, doctors, mental health care practitioners, they have to abide by the diagnosis criterion of the DSM-5. They can, so anytime we go to a counselor or a doctor or what have you, they have to treat according to the diagnosis criterion of the DSM-5, right? So complex PTSD, since it's not featured, this is when a person have to get a little creative, okay, as far as like maintaining their health and coming up with a support-based blueprint. A lot of my stars already know I like to talk about the support base and how imperative and important it really is, right? It's very important, especially when you're thriving forward past narcissistic abuse. So you're going to have a constructive outlet for all of that. So when a person is dealing with complex PTSD, now the reason why I'm really pointing that out is because there is not a diagnosis criterion for the complex PTSD in the DSM-5. So when a person is diagnosed with PTSD, they're not going to be treated for the complex PTSD. So again, this is when a person may have to really do some research and become a little bit more educated about what he or she may need in order to thrive forward past narcissistic abuse. Okay, if they've been diagnosed with PTSD, and a lot of people have been diagnosed with PTSD, he or she may have a history of childhood trauma and narcissistic abuse. And let's just say that this person does, who's been diagnosed with PTSD, and they have symptoms of complex PTSD. Again, when they go to their healthcare practitioner, when they go to their mental health care practitioner, when they go to their doctor, when they go to their counselor, when they go to their therapist, now this is great that that's done. I'm not, going against that. It's great to have a support base. However, let's be clear. The complex PTSD symptoms are not going to be treated. They're not going to be noticed, okay, because it's not in the DSM-5 as a diagnosis criterion. And this is why I keep reiterating that, because some people, believe it or not, they don't realize that. Okay, so this is something that I came across a few years ago. Okay, so when it comes to the complex PTSD symptoms, this is when a person may, again, want to become a little bit more educated about those symptoms. And I've added that link in the description box below. Okay, so some of you might, want to look at that because you might find it a little bit interesting. I know I did. A few years ago when I found out more about this, It was very helpful because as long as you know what a mental health care practitioner can do for you versus what they cannot do, it helps a lot. It reduces your stress. Some people end up very stressed out because they're trying to find the support for having gone through narcissistic abuse. It's already stressful enough trying to find the support for that. But when you add complex PTSD, then it can become a little bit more stressful. So I hope what I just shared with you all will reduce some of your stress because really, this is something that when a person is dealing with something such as narcissistic abuse, it's already very challenging. It can be, some days can be like, people may feel hopeless. They may feel depressed. They may feel anxious. And to add on to that, just the emotional stress with dealing with all of the shenanigans of the narcissist and cluster B personality. It's just, added stress and then layers upon layers of trauma stemming from their childhood. That's a lot to deal with. That's a lot. Okay. So I say when a person is setting up their support base, because after all, you're going to be the one navigating your support base when you set it up. Okay, so that means you're going to have to team up with certain mental health care practitioners that you feel is a great match for you. When you're more educated about this sort of thing, such as narcissistic abuse and complex PTSD symptoms, as well as PTSD symptoms and childhood trauma and all of these things, the more you know, the better you can help yourself. And also, you can team up with mental health care practitioners who are more of a match for you, right? And those counselors and therapists that are more of a match for you because they understand your plight. They understand what you've gone through, not just looking at the symptoms, because it goes deeper than that, right? So I just wanted to really point out the complex post-traumatic stress disorder and the CPTSD, because this is not in the diagnostic, it's not a diagnostic criterion in the DSM-5. Okay, so and again, they have PTSD, but not complex PTSD. Okay, and actually I did about 2 or 3 videos about this particular thing, just the complex PTSD. And yeah, that was a 3-part. There was one of those videos that was a 3-part video. And I just had one of my stars reach out to me and they were concerned about that. So I think that they found that video very helpful. Okay. So again, all of these health issues here that I mentioned, lung cancer, hepatitis, anxiety, depression, addiction, some people are suicidal behind this, anxiety, all these things. This is just some of the things that a person can end up with as they are adults. Okay. If the history is that they have childhood trauma as a result of it being exposed to high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. Okay. The rabbit hole is very deep, especially when you're talking about layers upon layers of trauma a person is dealing with, all stemming all the way back to their childhood. And I don't know about you all, but I think that when you become a little bit more educated about this stuff, yeah, it's just like the world just gets lifted off of your shoulders, because then you can finally put a name to what you're experiencing. It's not just like like a bad dream that you're reliving over and over again. So I really wanted to share this tonight with you all, because I'm telling you, when I found some of this out, it was like the world just got lifted off of my shoulders, and it reduces stress. Of course, we're still going to face some challenges. And of course, there's still going to be some stress, especially if you have currently a dysfunctional relationship with a narcissist or a cluster B personality. Yes, the stress is going to be there. The challenges are going to be there. However, when you are armed with a little bit more education about narcissistic abuse, about childhood trauma, and, again, about the PTSD, okay, so it's kind of like a relief. And it goes deeper into why it really isn't your fault what happened to you as a child. Because I know, again, we hear it sounds cliche. We hear it sometimes like it wasn't your fault, but it's very good to also know exactly why it's not your fault. Sometimes it's pretty clear. You were a child. I was a child. We were all children at one time. And some of the things that we experienced as children were very hurtful. For some of us, it was abusive, and it had caused some issues later on in our lives, okay, such as the complex PTSD, the PTSD, and all those other health issues that I mentioned. Okay, it happens. It wasn't our faults because we were children. Okay, so there was nothing we can do to change that person. We certainly couldn't control him or her. We couldn't control our parents. We couldn't control our grandparents or whoever it could have been for you that was mistreating you, and you were exposed to that high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. So again, it's pretty cliche. It sounds cliche when we hear, well, it wasn't your fault, but it's always good to know exactly, that it is brought into context. Why wasn't it my fault? Other than the obvious, I was a child. Yes, but let's get into really the science of it, or, let's really get into why it wasn't my fault. Okay. All right. So tool number 1, increase your knowledge on adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma, and narcissistic abuse. It might be a relief to find that there are options available to you that can help you thrive forward. Right. So when we find out what our options are, again, it's like that weight gets lifted right off of your shoulders. Okay, so it's always good to know some of these things. Next tool, build a support base. My stars already know that's my favorite thing to say, other than the word shenanigan, right? All right, some of my stars already know that's one of my favorite words. But anyway, build a support base. This is going to be very important. This might be overwhelming to some people due to how accustomed he or she might be to, utilizing or using a particular method, or let's just say coping skills. A lot of us gravitate towards what's very familiar to us. So we may have particular coping skills that we have done for so long, dealing with narcissistic abuse, dealing with childhood trauma, dealing with being raised in a dysfunctional family, dealing with maybe having been married to a narcissist or cluster B personality, whatever the challenges may be for you. There's a particular coping mechanism that we all have, and we gravitate towards that because it's familiar. Okay, so when we build a support base and we start working that support base, see, the support base is designed to encourage us to continue to thrive forward past whatever that was that we was facing, that may have caused us trauma, that may have had us hit a brick wall for a while, that may have had us at the bottom looking up, looking nowhere but up, right? What do they say? When you're at the bottom and you're looking up, there's nowhere else to go but up, right? However, when you have that support base, one of the great things about the support base is that it is supposed to be designed to teach you certain tools, such as a coping skill or a few coping skills to help you to thrive forward, right? So this is what we want that support base for. So it's going to help you out. I know it helps me. I have a support base, and I've been working that support base for a little while now. A lot of my stars know I've talked about this. I've spoken about it. But the support base is very important, especially when you have a support base that is designed to help you to thrive forward past narcissistic abuse or past any other thing that has caused you trauma. Okay, so again, when you have a support base, it's going to help you to stay focused on your overall healing, your overall well-being, instead of being focused on the narcissist and the cluster B personality and how to supply him or her. That's not going to help. Okay, the narcissist and the cluster B personality, they're not there in your life to help you out. They're there to make sure that their false self-image is being supplied. and is thriving and surviving. Unfortunately, when the narcissist and cluster B personality is focused on feeding their own addiction, feeding their own false self-image, making sure that survives, it's at everybody else's expense. Okay, so we want to keep in mind how sometimes the support base is not very strong, because number one, the narcissist may be a part of the support base. Say, for instance, a person has divulged or told the narcissist a lot of intimate details about his or herself, what they're going through. They're going to counseling. They're going to a therapist. In other words, they're making the narcissist and cluster B personality a part of their support base. That's not going to work. That's not going to work at all, because the narcissist and cluster B personality, they're going to be trying to knock down whatever progress you're making. They're going to try to encourage you to give that up, because they want you for the narcissistic supply. They want to be the center of your world, and they want to make sure that you're not getting any better. You're not living your life to the full, because they want you as the narcissistic supply. Okay, so a lot of us who have researched narcissism and narcissistic abuse, a lot of us know that narcissists and or cluster B personalities, this is one of their main goals. This is one of their main aims, is to make sure that they never run out of narcissistic supply. That means if somebody else that they know of is going to counseling, they have a support base, right, to thrive past narcissistic abuse, they may have gone no contact. The narcissist is not going to like that, right? They're not going to like that. So one of the things that he or she is probably going to end up doing is making sure that they sabotage any progress that you're making to heal and or to thrive forward past narcissistic abuse. Because your getting better is a direct threat, is a direct challenge to his or her false self-image. Okay, so a lot of us have experienced this, and or we have done some research to understand what we were experiencing. Okay, because believe it or not, some people who have experienced what I just described, they didn't really understand what it really was that they were experiencing. They thought it maybe, for instance, they were romantically involved with a narcissist or a cluster B personality. They just thought it was a bad romance. They've never heard of a cluster B personality. They've never heard of narcissistic abuse or a narcissist or a person who has a narcissistic personality. They've never heard of that. So they just thought that they were in a bad romance. They just thought they were in a bad marriage. They just thought that they had ended up with someone who is very jealous from time to time. At first, they thought it was cute because this person was overprotective of him or her. And now, it's just out of hand. So this person may have stumbled upon the information later on, and then it became very clear to him or her what they were experiencing. And that was narcissistic abuse. And they had actually been involved with a person who's a narcissist or a person who has a cluster B personality. Now, one of our stars recently asked me, what's the difference between the cluster B personality and a person who has a narcissistic personality? Well, the narcissistic personality is a symptom of a cluster B personality. In other words, it's one of the clusters. The cluster B is a personality disorder. Now, according to the DSM-5, this particular personality disorder is one of the most complex, and that is the cluster B. There's a cluster A and there's a cluster C personality. However, again, according to the DSM-5, it is the cluster B personality that is the most complex. Okay, so the difference between the cluster B personality and the narcissistic personality is that in one of those clusters or a symptom is the narcissistic personality. So every person that you know that has a cluster B personality is not a person who necessarily has a narcissistic personality. So every narcissist that you meet has a cluster B personality, but not every cluster B personality that you meet or know of has a narcissistic personality, because the narcissistic personality is a symptom or a cluster of the cluster B. Okay, it's just like having a cold. What's one of the symptoms of a cold? Runny nose, congestion. It's just think about it like that. So every time some of you may hear me say a cluster B personality and or narcissist, that's why I phrase it that way, because the narcissistic personality is just a cluster. It's just a symptom of a cluster B. So, and it's interesting how the DSM-5, again, it actually has, it's considered, the cluster B personality, according to the DSM-5, is considered one of the most complex personality disorders. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, because the cluster B personality, they have a couple of areas that they're chronically impaired in. Okay, there's two functions that the cluster B personality is very impaired in, and that is empathy. So they don't have empathy for people. They may have some sympathy for people, but they don't have any empathy for people. The second reason is because he or she, they lack interpersonal skills. I mean, they're terrible at it. Some of us, we're okay at it, right? But the cluster B personality, they are the worst at the interpersonal skills. Number one, because they have no interest in connecting to anyone. See, the narcissist and cluster B personality, they have made a secret vow to not love anyone anymore for any reason. That's a secret vow that they have taken, because if they told you or I or anyone that they're involved with that they don't love them or they don't care for them, no matter, they're just in it for the narcissistic supply, they won't have anyone around him or her. They would not manage to manipulate others. They wouldn't manage to be able to draw anyone in, to beguile them, to seduce them so well. The narcissist and cluster B personality, they have to manipulate everyone in order to get the narcissistic supply. So this particular individual, the narcissist, once again, he or she, they've taken the secret vow to never love anyone anymore for any reason. That means they're not interested in the connection. They're not interested in anything but their false self-image thriving and surviving. And I know, some people, unless they have actually experienced this, they find this very difficult to grasp. They find it very difficult to believe this. However, there's a lot more people becoming a little bit more vocal about this now. So, narcissistic abuse is a big buzz right now. Okay, now on the Luminousz Star channel, I like to make sure that I let it be known that number one, not every cluster B personality that you meet has a narcissistic personality. Okay, and every narcissist that you meet, they do have a cluster B personality. See, there's differences there. Some people who claim others to be narcissists, and I'm just speaking in general, there are some people that speak of others as being narcissists in his or her life, when the bottom line is they're not narcissists, or that particular person is not a narcissist. They may have a cluster B personality. You see, they may have a cluster B personality, but they're not a narcissist. So this doesn't belittle his or her experience, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the smear campaigning. See, it doesn't belittle those experiences. I just think that it's a great thing when we learn exactly what we're dealing with. Okay, so I really appreciate that question. That, actually I had it was a few stars that asked me that question. What's the difference between the cluster personality and the narcissistic personality? So I certainly hope that I've made that clear to some of you, and who maybe were a little bit, confused about that, because I do know some people have accused, some others of being a narcissist, when actually that person just had a cluster B personality. It happens, but this does not mean to belittle their experiences, because cluster B personalities, like narcissists, they still do the smear campaigning. They still want that narcissistic supply. So whether they are a cluster B personality without being a narcissist, or if they are a narcissist, doesn't matter. They still want that narcissistic supply. So when it comes to children being raised by narcissistic parents, facing that high adversity, right? The same thing applies. He or she, they may be dealing, and they won't understand this. The child may not understand that until they become an adult, that their mother or father or both their parents or their grandparents, maybe none of them were narcissists, but all of them had a cluster B personality. You see, and I just think that it's very important just to place things into context, especially when we're dealing with something like this. Because the cluster B personality and the narcissist, believe it or not, a lot of them, they understand exactly what they represent, and they know who they are. Now, I don't mean like the identity. Say, what some people say, well, I know who I am. This is not what I mean. What I'm saying is the cluster B personality and the narcissist, they have a deep understanding of what they do in order to get the narcissistic supply. But they're not going to talk to us about it, right? That's just like a person who's an alcoholic. They're fiending for that next drink. They understand that they want that next drink, but they're probably not going to tell you why. They're probably not going to get deep into that. Okay, they may not even really understand it. When it comes to the cluster B personality and the narcissist, a lot of them, they do have a deep understanding of what they're doing in order to get the narcissistic supply. So they have a deep understanding of themselves. In other words, they understand that they have a predatory nature. You ever heard that phrase, a person's nature? A person is acting out of his or her nature. Well, this is the same thing. The cluster B personality and the narcissist, they understand what their nature is. They understand it. This doesn't mean they're going to explain it, because a lot of them are individuals who have a strong sense of entitlement. They want the narcissistic supply. They're not going to explain to you why they want the narcissistic supply. They just want the narcissistic supply. So when it comes, again, to bring all of this into context, when it comes to the cluster B personality and the narcissist, I just think it's very important to know which one you're dealing with. I think that's very important, because it's going to help place into perspective for you what your next step could be. As long as you're staying focused on what you need to do in order to thrive forward past narcissistic abuse. Because when you get into when it's in a clear perspective for you, when it's placed into context and you really know what you're dealing with, that's going to help you to find out or figure out exactly what you need as a support base and who you need as a part of your support base. Because you can say, well, okay, I'm dealing with a person who's a narcissist. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to become a little bit more educated about. This is the particular counselor or therapist or a doctor or whatever. This is who can help me, because I've now I understand a little bit more. Okay, this is a person who's a cluster B personality. And you may say, well, gosh, for years, I thought this person was a narcissist. Now I know this is a cluster B personality. This person is not a narcissist. They're a cluster B personality. And again, this is just an example, guys, right? This is just an example. So when you find out exactly who and what you're dealing with, that's going to help you to stay focused on your own support base and your overall well-being. And it's going to help you to stay focused on thriving forward. Because if a person is confused about even what or who they're dealing with, that's going to make for a weak support base. And that person is probably going to become a little bit more stressed as he or she may find out that they've wasted some time, or they were going in a particular direction and they needed to go in the opposite direction. I hope that makes sense, because I just think that when we place things into context and we're understanding what and who we deal with, where we're dealing with, it just makes it a lot better to deal with certain things and know how to navigate, right? And be able to build the support base. Because if you don't know who you're dealing with and what they represent, that's kind of like you're just, you're kind of taking stabs in the dark. And the narcissist in the cluster B personality, they're still being supplied the whole time. So, okay, I got to look at my time here. I'm going to join you guys and gals in the chat room, but I really wanted to just talk about this because I just think this is something very important, especially when we're talking about individuals who have dealt with this since their childhood and who may be right now as adults. They're trying to figure out how to navigate that support base, how to start the support base, where to start, period, because they're ready for that change, but they really don't know how to go about it. Okay. Third tool, find constructive ways that help you to relax, reduce stress, and manage any anger that you might have due to painful childhood experiences. Now, this one I think is pretty self-explanatory. Need that constructive outlet. You need that support base. Because, at first, when I was, years ago, when I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress injury, I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I really didn't. I was angry. I was pissed off. Okay, I'm just going to be honest about that. I didn't want to talk about it. I was angry. I was hurt. And then there were times that I was confused about, how could this have happened? Because, and actually I had my moments when I was too proud to ask for help. And that wasn't pretty. So this is why I continue to reiterate about that support base. We need that constructive outlet. When you think about the narcissistic abuse, you've gone through an ordeal right there. The shenanigans, the tactics, the diabolical tactics for narcissistic supply. You've gone through that. That's taken its toll. Okay, and then we talked about the health issues. But a child who is facing adverse effects, when a child is facing or dealing with narcissistic abuse, I think that that's high adversity. Some people, again, they may debate that and say, well, it really doesn't have anything to do with the other. I disagree. I think that when a child is being narcissistically abused, yeah, he or she is facing high adversity, which can lead to those health issues that I was talking about later in life. So again, some of us right now, we're dealing with certain things and we had no idea that it had anything to do with our childhood. Because some people might say, well, okay, if you had a crappy childhood, you may grow up and you may end up smoking a lot. That's your coping mechanism. That's your coping skill. You drink a little bit more than you need to, or you should, but you're dealing with what happened to you when you were a child. And some people may say that, and I get it. A lot of people probably will say that. But when you look a little bit more deeply at the narcissistic abuse a child may face, that's high adversity. That can bring on toxic amounts of stress. And that can lead right into those health issues that I was talking about. Mainly, and I really want to point out again, complex PTSD, which is not featured as a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5, but those symptoms are there. And as that person grows from childhood to adolescence to adult, they're dealing with layers of trauma. That's where your complex PTSD comes in. Layers upon layers of trauma. And as the years go by, those layers just increase. So how does a person work through all those layers? So again, this is when a person has to become a little bit more creative when they're talking about their support base. So on one hand, if they've been diagnosed with PTSD, they can take care of that. I still say it's a great idea to get as much education as possible about this. The symptoms of complex PTSD, the symptoms of PTSD, childhood trauma, and narcissistic abuse, and the aftermath of it. Okay, so, I just say that might sound overwhelming to some, but I still say that the more that you know about this, because after all, you're the one that's going to be navigating your support base. You're going to be teaming up with certain individuals to help you to get through this, to cope and deal with this much more effectively. So that way you're not always supplying the narcissist and you don't find yourself repetitiously engaging or investing in dysfunctional relationships with narcissists or cluster B personalities. Because a lot of us have been there, done that too. We gravitate towards what's familiar. So that, again, the references and resources, you can find them in the description box below. And in the chat, again, I mentioned those 2 links that I did place in the chat. Just scroll up to the top of the chat, and you will find those 2 links there, okay, for the slides. Because at the end of the presentation slides, you'll find the references and resources link, or just go to the description box and look at those references and resources there. Okay, now the second link that I placed in the chat is, let's see, I think I have the right one. Let's see. Yes, seriously considering the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. Okay, now this is another video that I posted up, I believe it was last night. Okay, I think it was last night. But anyway, I wanted to just quickly go over some of the topics. Okay, now this is the next slide. That's the second slide that you'll find in the chat. All right, now the topics of discussion. See, the cortisol effect. This is where we're talking about the impaired hippocampus and the overactive amygdala. Okay, so the cortisol is a hormone that is released. Okay, and this is going to actually, let me just check something. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's see, primal emotions. Let me see something, guys. Now, there was something I wanted to point out about that, the cortisol, because I think this is very important. But when we talk about the hippocampus and the amygdala, these 2 things can be impaired. Okay, so the cortisol has the potential to impair the hippocampus while overstimulating the amygdala. Okay, now this is due to an overactive amygdala, due to an overactive amygdala and an altered hippocampus, one may focus more on his or her emotions rather than being able to think critically about the new information that's coming in. Now, when you place a child in a hostile situation and they're being raised by a cluster personality or a narcissistic personality, it can be grandparents, it could be their parents or the guardian. So when the child when they have an overactive amygdala and when they have an altered hippocampus, they're not going to be able to focus. In other words, the brain will not focus, the brain will not work effectively. It's not that the brain is not working at all. It's just that the child is not able to focus. They're not going to be able to concentrate. That it's like the child is in a constant flight or fight mode. They're there all the time. We're not designed that way. We're not supposed to be in that state. Okay, especially when the fight and flight activation is maladaptive. That's not normal. Okay, we're not supposed to do that. So when the hippocampus and the amygdala has been altered, that's gonna have the child functioning in a way that actually he or she wasn't supposed to function. In other words, is a malfunction. So they're not going to be able to focus on the information coming in. And that child, you can even say teenager and adult. Let's just say you're dealing with an adult now that has that history of being narcissistically abused. So the hippocampus and the amygdala has been altered. Now it's malfunctioned. Okay, now I don't want to make this sound like this is doom and gloom. There is a way. You have to go see what's the word, or the doctor, neurologist, in order to find out how to reverse that. Okay, so anyway, let me not jump ahead. The hippocampus and the amygdala being altered this way, this means that the child or the adult, right? An adult of a narcissistic, let's just say the adult of a narcissist. History of childhood trauma, history of being a narcissistically abused, right? Adult of a narcissist, adult child of a narcissist. Let's just say right now, there's information that he or she is receiving. They're not going to be able to focus on that. This is where the brain fog comes in. They're not going to be able to really concentrate and focus. However, their brain will, because of now how it functions, their brain will direct them to focusing on the emotional stuff. So this is why sometimes that individual internalizes a lot of the things that the narcissist does. They internalize it. They're like a sponge soaking up all of the toxicity, soaking up all of that negative energy, soaking up all of the experiences of the dysfunctional relationship due to the overactive amygdala and the fact that the hippocampus has been altered. So that person, they're not going to be critically thinking about what's going on in that relationship with the narcissist. Therefore, they're not going to be their best problem solver. It's not that they're their only problem solver. They're not going to be able to be their best problem solver. So they're going to tend to not really resolve their own issues. Okay, so they're going to be focused more on the emotional stuff. They're going to be more emotional. I hope that makes sense. So they're not going to really be critically thinking about what's going on. They're going to be more emotional. So when a narcissist is pulling shenanigans, the adult child of the narcissist, again, they're not going to really be trying to resolve that issue, or they're going to have a hard time doing it. They're going to be more emotional. They're going to be internalizing everything that's going on. They're going to take the blame. Okay. And this is, again, due to their childhood, what they have gone through. The narcissistic parents grooming them to behave this way, grooming them to self-sacrifice, grooming the child to think a particular way, to even perceive themselves a particular way, which is not going to favor him or her. It's going to favor the narcissist. So again, the adult child of the narcissist, due to the amygdala, the amygdala and the hippocampus being altered, they're going to tend to be a little bit more emotional. Therefore, they're going to tend to be more reactionary, which is going to feed the narcissist or the fuzzy personality. And they're going to less likely to critically think about all of the shenanigans and how they can resolve that issue. In other words, to maybe get out of that situation, maybe to end the relationship and figure out how they can do so, because there are circumstances that are different. Circumstances vary. Situations vary. Not everyone can just leave the narcissist. I get it. Not everyone can just, it's not a perfect world we live in. Again, the situation and the circumstances are different. So that individual, even though he or she, they cannot just up and leave or in the relationship with the narcissist, because they may have children with him or her. You know, it can be pretty complicated, right? This is understandable. The bottom line is this: when that person is critically thinking about what's going on, he or she is going to be also thinking about, okay, how can I get out of this situation? But an adult child of a narcissist, right? And this is possible due to the amygdala being overactive and being that the hippocampus has been altered. He or she is more than likely going to internalize that particular situation. They're going to be they're going to blame themselves. They're going to take it all in. While the narcissist, or they may even be reactionary, because the narcissist is being supplied by all that. And again, this is the grooming process of the adult child of the narcissist. That we're talking about their history, okay? Their history of going through or facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse. So I just think this is very deep, you know, and I certainly hope that I was able to break some of this down for you all without confusing you. I didn't really want to confuse anyone. You know, I just wanted to break this down as best as I could. But anyway, I did do a video on this. If you haven't watched it, check that video out. But I really think this is very, very interesting. And I just really wanted to shed some light on this. Okay, so the diabolical tactics by the narcissist begins to take its toll in the guise of emotional stress. Because remember, I was saying that a person, the adult child of the narcissist, more than likely they're going to be reactionary. They're going to internalize all that. Yeah, that's emotional stress. That's emotional stress. So basically, what I wanted to point out here is how from childhood, when that child is facing adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, it tends to carry out throughout on into their adulthood. So childhood, adolescence, and then adult. Then they're going to have all these health issues. Okay, and it's just all coming together. So layers upon layers of trauma, the complex PTSD symptoms, layers of trauma, the narcissist and the plus B personality in that dysfunctional relationship, they may say or do something to trigger the adult child of a narcissist. And he or she is like they're a child again. The way they cope and deal with all of the shenanigans. Again, because of the hippocampus being pretty much impaired or damaged, not to the point where it cannot, have repaired. The amygdala being overstimulated, because this is where the primal emotions come in, such as love, hate, fear, lust. And if that's overly stimulated, this is why the adult child of the narcissist tends to become reactionary. Every time the narcissist pulls shenanigans, they tend to become reactionary rather than critically think about what's going on in that relationship, because the hippocampus has been altered. Okay, so the new information that's coming in, what's the information? The information is that they're in a dysfunctional relationship with the narcissist and cluster personality, and they're going through certain things. They're going through a lot of changes. So that's what the situation is. So a person who's critically thinking about that, they're going to be thinking about how to get out of that situation, how to resolve that issue. But a person who has an overactive amygdala and the hippocampus has been altered or damaged, they're going to do the opposite. They're going to be more reactionary. They're going to be more emotional. I hope that makes sense. So again, a neurologist can, that would probably be the specialist to go see about something like, but anyway, all of this is in the description box below. I have all of those references and resources. The links are there. And I just certainly hope that you guys and gals take some time out and just review some of those things, because I think you're going to find it very interesting. But this is why we can see how sometimes the narcissist and cluster personality, they know how to push our buttons, right? And this is why, right? Because when you factor in the grooming process from childhood, and then the childhood trauma, and then facing high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, all of that adds up, complex PTSD, all of that adds up. So again, the dysfunctional relationship with a narcissist, it just kind of triggers certain things. This is why the narcissist and the cluster personality likes for you to be focused on what hurts. What are some of those unresolved issues you have from your childhood? That's what the narcissist wants to know about. They want you to focus on that, because they eat, they feed, they tap right into the energy field, because emotions is energy. Emotions are energy in motion, right? That's another way to look at our emotions. Okay. So the narcissist and cluster personality, they want to continue to get that false self-image thriving and surviving. So they want to continue to be fed. They want their narcissistic supply to be plentiful. They're not trying to lose that. So this is also why whenever you show signs of getting better, the narcissist, they don't like that. They try to discourage people around him or her to heal or get better or to continue to thrive forward, because that's a direct threat to their false self-image. That's a direct threat and a challenge to him or her. Their false self-image is not going to be fed, and the narcissist is not going to have that. They cannot have that at all. So, okay, let me go ahead and conclude this. And I certainly, again, I hope a lot of you got something out of this live stream tonight. Now, Sunday is going to be another live stream. Now, before I get to the chat room, there is one more thing I wanted to point out to you all. Now, I brought this up. I don't think you guys can. Let's see. It's in the description box below. This is a particular link here. Now, I'm going to just read something really quickly for you. Now, this is from the Harvard. This is a website I'm going to read this from Harvard. And here they're talking about the early experiences influencing the developing brain. Okay, now this is talking about children who have been exposed to high adversity, which can lead to toxic amounts of stress. And then we're talking about those health issues that they can end up with later in life. Okay, so I had mentioned something about certain things that can happen when a child is facing that, such as their DNA reading, their brain structure, it's their immune system. All these things can be absolutely affected. Okay, so let me read this really quickly. Early experiences influence the developing brain. From the prenatal period through the first years of life, the brain undergoes its most rapid development. And early experiences determine whether its architecture is sturdy or fragile. During early sensitive periods of development, the brain's I think it's circulatory, something like that. Your circuitry. I think that's the word. Anyway, is most open to the influence of external experiences, for better or worse. All right. During these sensitive periods, healthy emotional cognitive development is shaped by responsive, dependable interaction with adults, while chronic or extreme adversity can interrupt normal brain development. For example, children who were placed shortly after birth into orphanages with conditions of severe neglect show dramatically decreased brain activity compared to children who were never institutionalized. Yeah, pretty deep. So basically, children, as I mentioned before, when they're facing a high adversity, such as narcissistic abuse, the brain and the way it functions is altered, and usually not for the better. Okay. And again, as I stated, a neurologist is probably the specialist you may want to go see. And I'm not telling you all to do this. I'm just saying, after you do some research, then you can figure out exactly, how you want to work your support base. And I know a lot of you already have a support base, so this is great. But again, I wanted to shed some light on this, so we can really see here how early childhood, let me see something. So early exposure to high adversity can absolutely affect children. Okay. So by the time they become adults, they're suffering some of those health issues that I was talking about, like the complex PTSD symptoms and the PTSD symptoms and these sort of things, lung cancer and hepatitis and heart disease. So chronic stress can be toxic to a developing brain. So chronic stress, if a child is under chronic stress, their brain development can be altered. Okay. So it's just really, it's something else. But I really wanted to point that out. Now, that particular article, let's see, that I read from, that article, you can find it in the description box below. All right. Let's see. I think that was all I wanted to read for you all. Yeah, I think that was it. I wanted to make sure I got it all. Hold on a sec, guys. I want to make sure I got my thingy. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and join you guys in the chat. Just wanted to make sure I got my little thingy here. I wanted to show you guys something. This book here, I know I had mentioned this in a few of my videos, but this book, I'm still reading this book. It is so good. It's called Terrifying Transferences. I don't know if you can really see this. It may look opposite or backwards to you. But anyway, it's entitled Terrifying Transferences, and you can find it in the description box below. But in several of my videos, I have mentioned this particular book because I just think it is a awesome read, and it talks about the childhood trauma. Okay, and it also talks about how some people who go to counselors and therapists, just some of the brick walls that they run into, especially when they are trying to give a narrative about some of their experiences. Okay, so I just wanted to point that one out. All right, let me join you guys in the chat room now. All right. Okay. All right. Hi, Ellie Wynn. It's nice to see you again. I can see you. Welcome to the Luminousz Star stream. Hello, Cicely. Is it Cicely? I think it's Cicely. Chosen R, welcome. Let's see who else is here. Okay, Chosen R has a question. I think you do. Let's see, it's in caps. Should I let my narc mom keep my baby daughter for a month while I work? Well, see, this is gonna see. Remember, this is a great question because I know a lot of people have this concern because some of us have cluster B personalities in our families. So when it comes to us having low contact, right? Because some of us haven't gone to the point where we're like no contact. So this can be a very sticky situation. Because remember earlier when I was talking about it's a good idea to find out exactly who and what we're dealing with. So this is a great question, Choice R, but I'm just going to tell you, since I'm not in that type of situation, nor have I ever been in that type of situation. So I don't want to speak too deeply on this, but I will tell you that if you have any doubts in your mind that it's not a good idea to have your mom keep your child, then I say go with your gut. Okay, go with your gut. Do what you think is best, because that's your child, that's your baby, right? So you just, you go with your gut. If something inside of you say, well, I don't know, then it's probably a no. All right, because I know sometimes we have circumstances financially where we have to do our best. You might want to see if you can get or make some sort of other arrangements. But if your heart and if your instincts and if your intuition is saying, I don't think I should let mom keep my child, then it may be a reason why you're feeling that. It may be a reason why you're thinking that. However, on the reality side, or to be realistic, because your situation may be, financially, that may be the best way to go for you. Again, you might want to figure out some other things or some other strategies on how to make arrangements. Okay, so, but if you're thinking this and you're feeling that for a reason though. So, I've heard it said, when in doubt, okay, you might want to do without, or it's a no. If you're doubting, it's a no. But I certainly can't speak on your situation, and I certainly cannot tell you what to do. But I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of people are trying to figure out how to either co-parent with a narcissist or cluster B personality, or they're dealing with their parents, which is the grandparent of their child. The grandparents may be narcissists. Their grandparents may be cluster B personalities, and you don't want your child around that. So I certainly understand your concern. But again, if it's strong within you, it's like, I don't know, you might want to make other arrangements. You might want to try to figure something else out. Okay. And I wish you the best on that. Okay. Great question. All right. Anybody else have questions? Oh, okay. She's 20 months. Oh, little baby. Okay. Again, if you a choice, again, chosen R, if you are really strong and feeling like, you just, something is just telling you, I say go with your gut. And of course you have to balance that with what your reality is and what your situation is and, what you have to do. I get it. But I say balance that and try to strategize and plan something else, because you don't want your child in that hostile environment. And I say the best thing is, again, to educate, get more education about this, more education. So even if your child, as she or he is growing, right, and they may be around the grandparent or the grandparents who may have a cluster B personality or a narcissistic personality, education can't go wrong with that. So as you become more educated about this, then you pass that to your child. So even if your child is around the grandparents, they know exactly what they're dealing with. They know exactly what's going on. So if they are, if they're experiencing something, like say if the grandparents are pulling shenanigans, you see where I'm going with this? The child, your baby, your child, right? They're educated because mama or daddy taught them what narcissistic abuse is, what cluster B personalities are, what is a person, how does a person behave when they have a narcissistic personality. So when the education that you have about this and you pass it on to your baby, then you're already helping them a lot. Hope that makes sense also, because when I became a little bit more educated about this, of course, I started sharing what I knew with people that I love and care about. So, you know, when it comes to your baby, I know you don't want to play with that. And I understand. So I just say, if your gut is saying, you know, is a no, you might want to try to plan and strategize some other arrangements. But education, you can't go wrong with that. What you know, teach your children. And of course, I'm not telling you how to parent. All I'm saying is, and I'm suggesting, when you become a little bit more educated about this, and as you increase your knowledge, you pass that to your children. So that way, if they come across, whether it's the grandparents or anyone else who may be a cluster B personality or a narcissist, your children or your child will know, okay, I know what that is, and I know how to handle this. Because you're not going to always be around them. You know, you're not going to physically be around them all the time. So again, I wish you the best of luck on that. All right, who else is here? Black Phoenix, hi. Welcome to the stream. Jay the Conqueror, hello, hello. Hope I'm not missing. I hope I'm not missing anyone. Let's see. Chasing Fireflies. Hello, hello. Actually, I used to chase fireflies for real when I was a little girl. And my mother told me I better be back at home by dark. And this is no lie. I know some of you might be like, oh, no, she didn't do that. But for real, when I was a little girl, I used to watch out for the fireflies because they came right at twilight. So I was like about 7 or 8 years old when I used to do this. And every time the fireflies would come out or the lightning bugs, I knew, got to go home, because I used to like playing outside a lot. So those fireflies saved me from a lot of butt or spankings, right, on my bottom. I used to do that. I love that name. Yeah, that's great. Natasha Bell, welcome to the stream. Let's see, I'm looking for questions too. Now, if I don't get to your question, please email me your question. Red Star 7311, hello. Is that the wrong witch? Hello, hello. Welcome to the stream. And I'm looking at some of your comments too. Let's see. Cicely says, even the most, let's see, therapists are important or ignorant. Oh, yes. Okay, I got you. I got you, Cicely. Some of the therapists are ignorant of complex PTSD. And okay, yes, they are. They don't have a lot of information or know-how about this. Again, the DSM-5 doesn't have a diagnosis. I know I sound like a broken record, but when I found this out, it helped me out tremendously. You know, the DSM-5 does not have a diagnosis criterion for complex PTSD, but they have it for the PTSD symptoms. Okay, so it's like, what do you do if you have symptoms of complex PTSD, yet you've been diagnosed with PTSD? And again, this is where you have to become a little bit creative about how you want to work your support base. So for instance, if you have a counselor that can that has provided you treatment for PTSD symptoms, right? Yet you have the symptoms of complex PTSD. By finding out what the symptoms of complex PTSD is, and learning how to work those, how to treat each one of those symptoms. You don't look for the counselor to treat, because they can't anyway, to treat complex PTSD. They can only help you with the PTSD. However, in the comfort of your own home, or outside of the doctor's office, or outside of the counselor's office, or the therapist, or whoever you're saying, you're a mental health care practitioner, outside of that, you have, as a part of your support base, you have something that's going to help you deal with symptoms of complex PTSD. Matter of fact, that's what I wanted to show you all. I wanted to show you some of the symptoms of complex PTSD. But anyway, I think you get the idea. I certainly hope you do. It's like, you don't look for the counselor to deal with that, because they can anyway. According to the DSM-5, if it's not in the DSM-5, then they can't treat it, because they're under oath. They can't touch anything that's not in the DSM-5, right? So you have to find out, when you look at all of the symptoms that you do have for the complex PTSD, you can find out and educate yourself a little bit more about how to deal with those certain symptoms. Okay, so for instance, one of the symptoms is not sleep deprivation. What was it? Nightmares and flashbacks. Okay, it's having nightmares, having flashbacks. Okay, so how would you deal with that outside of the doctor's office, outside of the therapist's office? What can you do to relax? What can you do to reduce stress? What can you do to manage anger? What can you do to, deal with nightmares and flashbacks? So some of those things I mentioned, it's going to help you with the nightmares and the flashbacks. I know for me, it did. I used to have a lot of flashbacks. And there were times that I had my period where I had a lot of nightmares. Okay. And some of that was the cluster B personality that I was once involved with. I used to have nightmares about that person. When I started to reduce stress, the nightmares also started to become less frequent. Okay, so this is what we got to do. It's kind of like you have to come a little bit more creative about what you can do for yourself that is constructive. Because a lot of us, myself included, I had my periods of, not doing things that weren't very healthy for me to deal and cope with the aftermath of trauma. Okay, because I was just telling you all, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I didn't want to talk to anybody about that. I really didn't, because I felt like it was unfair. I felt like, that was something that it just felt like it should not have happened. We tell ourselves that something should not have happened, but then you have to realize it did. You have to realize that that's what your reality is. That's what it is. And you have to try to deal with it constructively. So, sometimes when it comes to dealing with symptoms of complex PTSD, we just have to figure out what's best for us, that's constructive, and make that a part of the support base. So, it's tough, but it's worth it. We're breathing, we're here, right? It's not like it's gloom and doom. Yeah. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Cicely, because this is a real issue. It's a real issue. Welcome to the stream, JC. Okay. Let's see who else is here. Okay. I love this. You guys are really talking to each other in the chat. I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. Hi, don't worry about it. Welcome to the stream. Hello, so totally over it. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. Okay. Now, again, if you guys have questions, and if I skipped your question, if you don't mind, send it to my email. Okay, because I'm definitely going to be checking emails between tonight and tomorrow, because we're going to have the next live stream coming up. So let's see. Welcome to the stream. Snip, 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 tear. From East Coast, from the East Coast, from the East Coast, from California. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the stream. Now, someone else here, Natasha Bell, mentioned, please address learned helplessness as it is associated with being a survivor. Natasha, that's a great point, because it is. There are some people who do learn helplessness, right? And it is a coping skill. But as I mentioned before, that sometimes when children are being raised by narcissistic parents or a parent who has a cluster B personality, they're being groomed. Okay, now I know that may sound like I'm blaming the parent. In a sense, I mean, the parent, yeah, they have a lot to do with that, because the child is developing. So the child is being groomed to behave and or think a certain way that's going to benefit the narcissist or those who have a cluster B personality or those who have a predatory nature. So as that child grows up, then yes, he or she, they may feel helpless. However, to me, it's a combination. It's like we gravitate towards what's familiar. So if the child has been groomed to be helpless and to self-sacrifice, all for the narcissistic supply, right? Or to supply the narcissist, then by the time they become adolescents and by the time they become adults, then see, that's something they have learned. They have learned to be helpless. So this is why, I was mentioning before, we hear it sounds cliche to say, well, it wasn't your fault that you were abused. It wasn't your fault that your parents neglected you or, what have you, right? Yes, it sounds cliche. However, I like to find out that this is just me personally. I hear that comment and I'm like, okay, other than the obvious, why wasn't it my fault? Okay. What makes this person behave this way? My parents or whoever, the grandparents or whoever the narcissist and the cluster B personality may be. And this is just a general example. It's like, if you have cluster B personality parents, if you understand why was it that they behaved the way they did, or at least get enough information, whereas you're like, the world lifts up off your shoulder. You're not as helpless. You're not feeling as helpless anymore, because that phrase, it's not your fault, goes very deep. I hope that makes sense. It goes very deep. However, it also places certain things into perspective for you, because it's like, all right, well, yeah, I know it's not my fault. However, I feel so helpless, and I still do things, whereas I feel hopeless. I feel helpless. But when you start to understand and learn, why wasn't it your fault? Other than the obvious, you were a child. But why wasn't it your fault? What happened? The way the narcissistic parents treated you. Why wasn't it? So when you place that into perspective, it not only uplifts, it helps relieve stress, and it helps you to understand things. And it's like the world lifts up off your shoulder. But not only that, you don't feel as helpless anymore. But we gravitate towards what's very familiar. So we're not going to just snap our fingers and just, come up out of, oh, I don't feel helpless anymore. It's a gradual process. But I understand, Natasha, what you're talking about, that learned, helplessness, because I say it stems from the grooming process of the narcissistic parent. So by the time that person grows up, that's a coping skill that he or she, they continue to use it, being helpless. They continue to use that. That's a great point, Natasha. Thank you. Now, if you all have any more questions, feel free. Otherwise, we're going to conclude. I know I went over the time. I was going to go until about 10 o'clock. Let's see. Lurzone, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Lurzone, welcome to the Luminousz Stars live stream. Welcome, welcome. Prosperity Woman for Life, welcome. Looks like you have a question. Let's see. How do we deal with flying monkeys for the yeah. Now, when it comes to the flying monkeys, and actually even the enablers, okay, but since we're talking about the flying monkeys, okay, so the flying monkeys of a narcissist, a lot of the times, really, when you think about it, they're the ones who really sabotage any efforts that you may make in order to thrive forward. Sometimes we say it's the narcissist, and sometimes we think it's a narcissist, but sometimes really the flying monkeys, they do the dirty work. They do the dirty work of the narcissist. So they're the ones who really work harder for our demise than the narcissist does. It's like the narcissist winds up the toy and they just sit back and they watch the toy just go bonkers. Sometimes the flying monkeys, they do work harder than the narcissist does for the narcissistic supply, which is kind of weird, but sometimes it works out that way. But yeah, when it comes to those flying monkeys, yeah, the reason why, and I say one of the reasons why they do this when it comes to the narcissist, they just really, they're team narcissists, right? It's because the narcissist is supplying him or her. See, the narcissist, they want the supply, okay? But nobody is going to get more supply than the narcissist if the narcissist can help it. When it comes to the flying monkey being recruited by the narcissist, one of the reasons why the flying monkey is more than happy to do the dirty work for the narcissist is because the narcissist has found out their vices. What are those deep, dark, dirty secrets of the flying monkey? What do they like? How they like to get their hands dirty? See, the narcissist wants to know that. The narcissist has the dirt on everybody, especially when they're controlling a lot of things. This is why the narcissist controls in the relationship. They control or they dominate. But when it comes to the flying monkeys are being supplied by the narcissist. Okay, so if they have, for instance, if the flying monkey is somebody that's around you, secretly they don't like you, they don't love you, they don't care about you, the narcissist knows that. The narcissist, that's part of their dirty secret, or that's part of the dirt that they have on the flying monkey. That's one of the vices of the flying monkey. And it could be gossiping. They gossip about you. They don't like you. So they gossip about you. They gossip about everybody else. The narcissist, they know that. So the flying monkey is team narcissist because they're trying to please the narcissist. And at the same time, the narcissist is supplying the flying monkey. It's kind of like the pig pen. All the pigs in the pig pen, they love rolling around in the mud. See, the narcissist in the cluster personality, this is why they recruit. Let me drink some water. This is why they recruit. This is why they recruit the flying monkey, because the flying monkey, see, they have some dirt. They have vices. They want to get supplied too. Now, part of their supply and or vice is to be loved, is to be approved by the narcissist. See, they're not in the narcissist club med. They're not an elitist in the narcissist club med. The flying monkey is really no better than the targeted prey. The enabler, in my opinion, is the worst. They're the worst. The enabler is the worst. Some people may debate that. They may say, well, the flying monkey is the worst. The enabler, in my opinion, is the worst, because the enabler knows a lot about the narcissist, whereas the flying monkey, sometimes they don't know too much about the narcissist, not their deepest, darkest, dirtiest secrets. The enabler does, because most of the enablers are emotionally connected on a deeper level to the narcissist than the flying monkey is. So in my opinion, The real energy whore is the enabler. And you right up there with the narcissist and the cluster personality. But those flying monkeys, yeah, they're team narcissists, and that's because they're being supplied as well. They have vices. They have deep, dark, dirty secrets that the narcissist knows about. The narcissist wants the goods on everybody. Okay, and this is another way that they like to triangulate. The narcissist will take the flying monkey and the enabler, right? And they will use both to triangulate you. For example, the enabler may be a family member to you and the narcissist. The flying monkey, they may be somebody, in the neighborhood or where you work at that you're not very close to. Secretly, they don't like you though, but they smile on your face. So when it comes to the enabler and the narcissist, see, the narcissist can triangulate you to themselves and the enabler. They use the enabler to keep you connected to him or her. The narcissist will use the enabler to keep you connected to him or her. So there's your triangle. Whereas the flying monkey may instigate all of it. They're from afar. They're not a family member. The flying monkey may be, again, somebody that you know about who secretly doesn't like you. So they're kind of like off in the distance, but they can instigate, they can kind of keep things going. Okay, so and again, my opinion is the enabler is a little bit worse than the flying monkey. But don't make any mistake. The narcissist, they will use both the enabler and the flying monkey to keep you in the sunken place. No, don't ever question that. Never doubt that. Okay, so absolutely, when it comes to the narcissist, they will find out all the dirt that they can before they actually use. See, that's another diabolical, fascinating thing. Not fascinating in a good way. It really is twisted that the narcissist will do. When they use the flying monkeys and they use the enablers, they have a lot of dirt on those people. They're not going to use them and not know the deep, dark, dirty secrets about them. They have to know that stuff so they can effectively use them. Otherwise, they're not good supply. They're not good narcissistic supply. Every flying monkey that the narcissist has recruited and every enabler that they have is good narcissistic supply. So they're going to know those deep, dark, dirty secrets. Great question. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope I got everybody in the chat. Wow. I want to thank all of y'all for joining me. Okay, stars, I'm going to wrap this up. I was looking to see if there were any more questions. I may have skipped some of your questions too. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Happy belated birthday, Black Phoenix. Or is it, don't worry about it? Whose birthday was Sunday? Anyway, happy belated birthday. Dawn Elizabeth, welcome to the Luminousz Star live stream. I certainly hope you come back again. It's more than likely we're going to have one Sunday. Black Phoenix, happy belated birthday. Okay, stars. Mwah. I'm going to wrap it up. And more than likely on Sunday, if you can join me again, we'll be right here. We'll be right here on Sunday. I don't know what time though, so I'm going to try to announce it before I go on, because I know sometimes when I did the live stream, I would just come live, okay? Instead of putting it out there that I was getting ready to come live or come on live, but I'll try to be a little bit better about that. All right. Okay, stars, good night. I'll see you guys and girls again soon. All right, just kind of double checking for any more questions. Matter of fact, I have a suggestion. I do have a suggestion before we go. If you guys and girls want to hear anything discussed, if you want me to go over something that's related to narcissistic abuse or childhood trauma, please send me an email or leave it. Actually, no, send it to me in the email. I was going to ask you to leave it in the comments after I upload this stream, but send me an email about something that you really want me to talk about. It could be in the live stream or it can be a video that I do. Actually, if you have any suggestions on how I'm conducting this channel, send me an email. All right. I have a few ideas in mind, and I'm thinking about doing this, certain things that may be a little bit new, but I don't want to jump out there and start doing things that you all will thumbs down. Okay. So if there's anything you want me to start talking about that's, of course, relating to narcissistic abuse and or childhood trauma, please send me an email and let me know. If there are certain things that you will want to see featured in this channel, let me know. A lot of videos, such as a lot of videos I do, I have it come out on Thursdays and Sundays. Night, guys.